800 people packed inside the Veyron Automotive Gala, and not one of them looked at Kofi Vale. That was the part nobody could explain later. Not the experts. Not the collectors who had spent decades training their eyes to catch what others miss. Not the journalists who would write 10,000 words about this night and still struggle to answer the simplest question. How did every single person in that building walk right past it? The gala was the kind of event where money did not announce itself. It didn't have to. It lived in the details. The hand-stitched leather interior of a 1961 Grand Tourer rotating slowly on a silk display pad. The chandelier overhead humming with the heat of its own light. Champagne flutes catching color from every direction. The marble floors were so polished they held reflections like still water. An orchestra kept the room breathing at a civilized pace. Every vehicle on the floor had been authenticated, insured, and assigned a number that would make most people go quiet. Every vehicle except one. It sat near the service corridor beneath harsh white light that did it no favors. Dull green paint, oxidized and peeling at the edges, faded racing decals that looked like they had been embarrassed by weather for 30 years, a cracked windshield trim, rust eating through the lower frame the way rust always eats, slowly and without apology. The kind of car that wealthy people called garage trash without lowering their voices. Hi viewers, have you ever walked past something your whole life, never knowing it was priceless? Drop the word yes in the comments right now, and hit subscribe if these are the kinds of stories you love, because there is so much more where this came from. Beside the car stood a man named Kofi Vale, 39 years old. Denim shirt faded at both elbows from use, not fashion. Dark slacks, clean but not tailored. Hands that had been calloused long enough that no amount of washing fully undid it. He was not performing anything. He was not nervous. He was simply standing beside his father's car at an event where his father's car had not been invited, and holding the small hand of his 7-year-old daughter, Amara, who gripped the sleeve of his jacket the way children grip things when a room feels too large for them. Amara wore a navy coat that someone had ironed carefully and recently. She pressed a small chrome hubcap against her chest with her free arm, the way other children carry stuffed animals. It had belonged to her mother. Executives moved through the room in tailored suits pretending they were not competing. Collectors drifted past the service corridor with the particular blindness of people who have already decided what matters. 2 of them glanced at the green car, then away, then toward the champagne station. Nobody stopped. Nobody crouched down. Nobody looked at the front quarter panel, specifically at one rivet, slightly asymmetrical, hand-cut, positioned in a pattern that did not belong on any ordinary production vehicle built in any decade. Nobody except Kofi. He had been staring at it for 4 minutes when the woman in the red dress began walking toward them from across the room. She moved like someone who had never once doubted that rooms belonged to her. And the moment her eyes landed on his car, Kofi Vale felt the temperature of the next 60 seconds shift in a direction he already recognized. He did not move. He kept his eyes on the rivet. Because something about that rivet was wrong in a way that made his chest go very, very still. And a man who has spent years learning to read what other people overlook knows that the most important things never announce themselves. They wait. She did not walk up to the car. She walked up to the problem. And in Danica Thorne's world, an uninvited vehicle parked near the center corridor of her event was a problem that required immediate management. Danica ran 3 automotive investment funds with a combined valuation that most people would need to sit down to understand. She had been named one of the 40 most powerful women in American business 2 years running. She wore a red dress that cost more than Kofi's monthly rent and moved through the room with the smooth, unhurried confidence of someone who had never once been told that a space was not for her. She stopped 6 feet from the car. Her gaze moved across it the way an appraiser moves across something already dismissed, not examining it, just confirming what she had already decided. Then her eyes went to Kofi. Then, briefly, to Amara. What exactly is this doing here? Kofi looked at her without urgency, without defensiveness. His voice came out level and clean. It was my father's. Danica held her smile. Two collectors drifted closer from the right. The orchestra continued its rotation. The champagne kept flowing. She crouched slightly near the front bumper, not to look, but to perform looking. The difference mattered, though she did not know it yet. Sentiment doesn't increase value. She straightened. Then came the words that would cost her everything 7 days later. This thing is probably worth more in scrap aluminum than as a collector car. A sound moved through the small nearby crowd. Not quite laughter. Agreement worn lightly, the way people agree with power when it costs them nothing. Amara's chin dropped. Kofi saw it before he registered anything else. The small dropping of her head, the way her grip on the hubcap tightened until the knuckles went pale. He watched his daughter absorb a blow that was not aimed at her, and the thing that moved through his chest in that moment was not anger. It was something quieter, something that settled. He did not argue. He did not explain. He did not look at Danica again. His eyes returned to the front quarter panel, to the rivet, to the thing he had not yet said aloud to anyone. Then a collector near the passenger side shifted his weight, a small, careless movement, and brushed against the door. The contact was nothing, a graze, but it exposed a sliver of undercoat beneath the oxidized green paint, no wider than a thumbnail. Kofi's eyes locked onto it. Deep cobalt blue. His heartbeat didn't spike. It just changed rhythm, the way a clock changes when someone wins it properly for the first time. Because that color, that specific shade of cobalt, applied in that specific process, did not belong on any car built after 1961. And it did not belong on any car that was supposed to still exist. Nobody in that room knew what they had just touched. The collector who brushed the door had already moved on to a 1958 Maserati 3 displays over. Danica was accepting a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server. The orchestra pivoted to something in a minor key. And every expert in that building continued to look everywhere except at the front quarter panel of a rusted green car near the service entrance. Kofi pulled out his phone. He did not call anyone. He did not text. He opened the camera and began working, methodically, quietly, the way a man works when he is operating at the edge of something enormous and does not want to disturb it before he is certain. He photographed the rivet, then the weld joints beneath the rear intake, then the wheelbase angle from the front bumper to the back axle, then the steering column assembly through the cracked windshield. Each image arrived like a piece of something he had been assembling in his memory for years without knowing it. 6 years. That was how long he had spent inside European restoration archives before his wife Zola died, and the shape of his entire life reorganized itself around a 3-year-old girl who needed her father more than the world needed another catalog archivist. He had memorized build patterns the way other people memorize song lyrics, not because he was trying, but because the information lived in him and had nowhere else to go. One racing division. Late 1950s. A small European manufacturer that collapsed before completing its public production run because the funding evaporated and the lead engineer walked out, and 2 prototype vehicles were loaded onto a transport truck headed for a warehouse outside Turin that burned down in 1962. Supposedly burned down. Supposedly took everything with it. Amara tugged his sleeve. "Daddy." Her voice was just above a whisper. "Why are you smiling?" He hadn't realized he was. He folded it back carefully. "Just looking at something," he said. She studied his face the way she always studied his face, reading it for information the words weren't giving her, then went back to holding the hubcap against her chest. Kofi looked at his phone screen. He looked at the weld joint photograph, then the rivet, then the wheelbase. Every single measurement aligned. He typed one sentence to a retired automotive historian in Medina, Italy, attached 3 of the photographs, and pressed send. Then he picked up Amara's hand and stood quietly in the noise and the light, and the champagne, and the orchestra while 800 people continued not looking at the most valuable thing in the building. At 3:11 in the morning, 3 words came back from Medina. "Were found exactly." Kofi did not sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, the screen the only light in the apartment, archived chassis photographs pulled from 3 different European restoration databases spread across the table in 2 rows. Amara's drawings were pinned to the corkboard on the wall behind him. Cars, mostly, drawn the way 7-year-olds draw cars, round and earnest with wheels that float slightly above the ground. The apartment was quiet the way it gets quiet after midnight, when you are the only person awake in a building full of sleeping people, and you are carrying something too large to put down. He thought about Zola, not with the heavy, sinking weight that grief carries in public, with the specific, private tenderness of a man remembering someone who knew exactly who he was before the world had a chance to agree or disagree. She used to watch him work, cross-referencing archive photographs, reading chassis documentation with the same focused silence other people brought to novels, and she would say it the same way every time, warm and sure. You always notice what everyone else misses, Kofi. He had thought she was being generous. She was not being generous. She was being accurate, and the distinction between those two things was something he was only now beginning to understand. Amara slept in the next room with the chrome hubcap on the pillow beside her. She had done this every night for 4 years, and Kofi had stopped asking why, because some things a child does are not questions. They are answers. He placed the archived photograph of the pre-production endurance chassis beside the image on his phone screen. The rivet pattern, the wheelbase distance, the weld joint configuration at the rear intake, the exact angle of the steering column. Everything matched. He sat with that for a long moment. The vehicle was one of 2 pre-production prototypes developed for an international endurance racing program that was canceled before it launched. The company dissolved. The prototypes were loaded onto a transport. The warehouse fire was documented, investigated, and closed. The cars were listed as destroyed. One of them was sitting in an event parking hold 3 miles from his apartment. His phone lit up on the table. Then again. Then a third time. Numbers he did not recognize. Then a name he did recognize. A collector in Scottsdale who had no reason to have his number and no reason to be awake at 4 a.m. Kofi stared at the screen. The room had started moving faster than he had. Danica Thorne did not check her phone until 7:43 in the morning. She had 6 missed calls. 4 from collectors she recognized. 1 from her lead acquisitions advisor. 1 from a number saved only as D. Reyes, a private authenticator she had used exactly twice in the past decade, both times for vehicles worth more than $10 million. She dismissed them the way she dismissed anything that interrupted her morning routine. She had a board call at 9, a due diligence review at 11, and a lunch with a fund manager who had flown in from Abu Dhabi specifically to meet her. She was not rearranging her morning around a rusted green car and a man in a denim shirt. Then her acquisitions advisor sent a photograph. It was an enlargement of a gala image, not a professional shot, something pulled from a guest camera roll and passed along. The image showed the front quarter panel of the car near the service corridor, caught at a sideways angle under the harsh overhead light. Someone had circled a section of the paint in red. Beneath the oxidized green surface, barely visible, pressed into the metal beneath layers of repainting and oxidation and 30 years of garage dust. A manufacturer's insignia. Small, partially worn, intact enough to read if you knew what you were reading. Danica set her coffee cup down. The room did not make a sound. Her advisor stood near the window and did not speak. The board call materials sat untouched on the desk. She stared at the photograph for a long time. 3 miles away, Kofi was making Amara breakfast. Toast, crusts off, cut into triangles the way she preferred. Orange juice in the cup with the painted foxes on the side. Amara sat at the table in her pajamas, the chrome hubcap beside her plate, asking him whether race cars dream when nobody is driving them. "Do you think Grandpa's car dreams about racing?" she asked. Kofi slid the toast onto her plate. "I think," he said, "it's been waiting a long time for somebody to finally pay attention to it." Amara considered this with the full seriousness of someone who found the question entirely reasonable. She picked up her toast. Back in the glass office, Danica's phone rang again. This time it was a private collector calling from Zurich. She picked up, and in the 40 seconds that followed, the word she heard repeated, quietly, precisely, by a man who had never once been wrong about a vehicle's origin, was a name. The name of the manufacturer. The name on the insignia. Her hand tightened around the phone, because that name meant the car in the service corridor was not a rusted collector vehicle of moderate interest. It meant the car was one of 2 surviving artifacts from a canceled racing program that the entire automotive world had believed extinct for over 60 years. And she had stood 12 inches from it. She had crouched beside the bumper. She had smiled. She had said the word scrap. In front of witnesses. On camera. Danica set the phone down on the desk and looked out through the glass wall of her office at the city moving below her, all of it ordinary, all of it unaware, and felt the particular, sickening cold of a mistake that cannot be walked back. She picked up a different phone. She dialed Kofi Vale's number. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. She stared at the ceiling for 3 full seconds, something she had not done in a professional setting in 11 years, then turned to her advisor. Find out where he is, she said. Today? This morning. She had no idea that Kofi had already seen her number come through. He had looked at it, set the phone face down on the counter, and gone back to cutting Amara's toast into triangles. Because the most powerful move in any room is knowing exactly when not to answer. Hi viewers, if you want to see how Kofi handles that phone call, and what he says to Danica when she finally stands in front of him without an audience, hit subscribe right now, because this next chapter is where this story truly ignites. The coffee shop smelled like burnt espresso and old wood, and Danica Thorne looked completely wrong inside it. Not in an obvious way. Her charcoal suit was understated. Her jewelry was small. She had made choices this morning, deliberate, calculated choices, to appear like someone who did not need a room to adjust when she walked in. But the chairs did not match in this coffee shop. The specials were written in chalk. The ceiling fan made a soft clicking sound on every 3rd rotation. And Danica Thorne, who had not sat in an uncontrolled environment in years, held her coffee cup with both hands the way people hold things when they have nothing else to hold on to. Kofi sat across from her. He had chosen this place. She had driven to it. That sequence of events was not accidental, and both of them understood it without saying so. Amara sat at a small table 2 feet behind Kofi, her navy coat folded over the back of the chair, coloring in a book she had brought from home. The chrome hubcap sat on the seat beside her like a companion. She did not look up. Danica placed both palms flat on the table, then lifted them, then wrapped them back around the cup. I think, she said, we may have underestimated what you have. She had rehearsed that sentence. It was precise, collective, managed. It spread the weight of the error across a group that did not exist, because no one in that gala had crouched beside the bumper. No one else had smiled. No one else had said the word scrap while a 7-year-old girl stood 3 feet away holding her dead mother's hubcap. Kofi looked at her. A full, quiet second passed. Why wait? 2 words. No sharpness in them. No performance. Just a question that removed every hiding place she had built into her sentence. The way you pull a thread and watch a seam come apart all at once. Her composure held on the surface. Underneath it, something shifted. He could see it in the stillness that moved across her face, the specific stillness of a person recalibrating in real time. She knew he remembered. Every word, every laugh from the crowd, every inch of Amara's chin dropping toward the floor. I'd like to help with the authentication process, she said carefully. My firm has relationships with the right people. It would move faster. Kofi did not respond immediately. Behind him, Amara looked up from her coloring book. She studied Danica with the direct, unfiltered gaze of a child who has not yet learned to look away from the truth. Daddy, she said, is that the lady who said mean things about Grandpa's car? The coffee shop did not make a sound. Danica set her cup down, and in the silence that followed, 3 seconds, maybe 4, She understood for the first time that there was no version of this conversation she was going to win. She had come to negotiate with a man who had already decided. She just did not know what he had decided yet. Neither did the 7 collectors in 4 different countries who had been calling his number all morning. But they were all about to find out. The authentication confirmation landed on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday morning the automotive world had lost its mind. Luca Bellini, 81 years old, the most respected private historian in European motorsport, did not release a statement through a publicist. He did not hold a press conference. He sent a 4-page document to 3 independent verification bodies simultaneously, and by the time those bodies finished reading it, they each made one phone call to one another, and then sat very quietly for a moment before the news moved. The car was real. One of 2 surviving pre-production endurance prototypes from a canceled 1959 international racing program. The second known prototype had lived behind glass in a private Swiss museum since 1978. This one had lived in a dead man's garage in an American city, unexamined, uncatalogued, unmissed, for over 4 decades. Bellini said it plainly at the public confirmation, the way only very old men who no longer need anything from anyone can say things plainly. Every credentialed expert who attended the Veyron Gala had the opportunity to examine this vehicle. Not one of them did. One man, without credentials, without an invitation, and without an audience, saw what they could not. That is the complete story. He said nothing else. The clip from the gala surfaced within hours. Danica crouching by the bumper. The word scrap aluminum carried clearly on the audio. It spread the way things spread when they confirm what people already suspected about how the world works. By Thursday, it had been viewed 11 million times by people who did not know what a pre-production endurance prototype was and did not need to know, because the story was not really about the car. It never had been. A rival bidder filed a challenge against the authentication through a legal channel that was dismissed in under 24 hours. Collectors flew in from Dubai, from Tokyo, from Zurich, from a private estate outside Johannesburg where a man named Darius Ease had been searching for this vehicle by description for 9 years. Kofi brought Amara to the auction in her navy coat, ironed again, the chrome hubcap held against her chest. The crowd noise hit them the moment they walked through the door, enormous, layered, the specific sound of a room full of people who have not yet gotten what they came for. Amara's face tightened immediately. Kofi was already reaching into his jacket pocket. He had the headphones before she asked. He crouched beside her and placed them over her ears, adjusting the fit the way he had done 100 times in loud places since she was 4 years old, and she looked at him with the settled expression of a child who has never once doubted that her father would think of the thing she needed before she needed it. He stood up. The room kept moving around them, enormous and expensive and urgent. Kofi Vale put his hand on his daughter's shoulder and walked them both toward the front. The auctioneer's voice opened the bidding at $500,000, and the room exhaled like it had been waiting to. Paddles went up. Paddles came down. The number climbed in increments that would have been life-changing in most rooms and were treated here as opening conversation. 1 million. Nobody flinched. 2 million. 3 people lowered their paddles. 7 did not. 3.5. Kofi stood near the left side of the room with one hand resting on Amara's shoulder. She sat in a folding chair beside him, headphones on, drawing on the back of an auction program with a pen she had borrowed from the woman seated next to her. She was drawing a car. It looked like the green car, round and low, with wheels that floated slightly the way her wheels always floated. 5 million. The texture of the room changed. The bidders who were still in it stopped pretending to be casual. Paddles that had been moving easily now moved with the particular deliberateness of people doing math in real time. Kofi did not watch the paddles. He watched Amara draw. She had added a figure beside the car. Small, dark, standing straight. Then another figure, smaller, beside the first one. Then a tiny circle in the smaller figure's hands. She had drawn the hubcap. She had drawn them. Near the back of the room, Danica Thorne sat in a charcoal suit with a bidding paddle across her knees. She had not raised it. Her board had authorized her to go to 7 million if the authentication held cleanly, and the authentication had held cleanly, and she had not raised it once, because the number had climbed past her internal limit before the authorization limit, and that gap was not something she could explain in any meeting room to any board. 5.5. 6. The room went quiet in a different way than rooms usually go quiet. Not the quiet of attention, the quiet of held breath. The auctioneer let it sit, the way experienced auctioneers let silence do the work that words cannot. 6.5. A single paddle. Near the center, Darius Ease, who had been searching for this vehicle by description for 9 years and had flown 17 hours to be in this room, held steady. Another paddle rose from the left side of the back wall. The auctioneer's eyes moved. 6.8. Amara looked up from her drawing. She studied the room over the top of her headphones, taking in the paddles and the silence and the strange, compressed energy of 200 people collectively not breathing. Then she looked up at her father. Kofi looked down at her. She held up her drawing. He took it from her carefully. 7 million. 7.5. The room stopped making any sound at all. One paddle. $8 million. The room erupted. And in the eruption, in the flash of cameras and the surge of reporters and the collision of sound from every direction, Kofi Vale looked at the drawing in his hand. A green car. A tall figure. A small figure. A tiny circle. His eyes did not move to the auctioneer. They did not move to the bid total on the board. They stayed on the drawing. For a long moment, that was the only thing in the room. The reporters moved the way reporters always moved, fast, together, microphones leading. Kofi did not move toward them. He turned left. He crouched down beside Amara, who had pulled her headphones down to her neck and was looking at the crowd the way she looked at loud places. Carefully, measuring how much of it she could hold before it became too much. He put both hands on her shoulders. "You okay?" She considered the question the way she considered everything, fully, without rushing. "It's really loud," she said. "I know. Daddy." She looked up at him. "Did we win?" He held her face in both hands for 1 second. Just one. His thumbs rested at her temples. "Grandpa's car won," he said. Grandpa's car finally got seen. Amara processed this. Then she nodded, slowly, with the particular gravity of a child who understands that some things matter in ways that have nothing to do with money. Someone caught it on a phone camera. A shaky, unsteady clip. The room erupting around them. Cameras flashing. 200 people celebrating an $8 million auction result. And a man on one knee in the middle of all of it, his daughter's face in his hands, talking about her grandfather. The clip did not need a caption. It accumulated 42 million views across 4 days. The comments were not about the car. They were not about the money. They were about the crouching, the hands, the specific choice a man makes about what to reach for first when the world finally stops ignoring him. Mothers shared it. Fathers shared it. Children who had lost parents shared it with the particular ache of recognition. People who had never owned a car in their lives and had no interest in automotive history shared it, because it was not about any of those things. Near the back of the room, Danica Thorne stood alone. She held the unused paddle in both hands. She watched Kofi stand up, lift Amara onto his hip, and move through the crowd with the unhurried steadiness of someone who had never once needed the crowd's approval to know his own value. And she understood, finally, completely, without any way to unknow it, that she had never been looking at a car. She had been looking at a man, and she had not looked carefully enough. 3 weeks would pass before she did anything about that. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning inside a plain white envelope with no return address. Just handwriting, careful and deliberate, the kind of handwriting that takes longer than it needs to because the person writing it wants the words to be right. Kofi opened it at the kitchen table after Amara left for school. The apartment was quiet. Rain on the window. The smell of her breakfast still in the air, the toast, the orange juice, the the specific warm smell of a home that is being used the way homes are supposed to be used. The letter was one page. It had no legal language in it, no qualifications, no careful phrasing designed to limit exposure, no assistant's voice shaping the edges of the words. It read the way things read when a person sits down alone and decides to stop managing and start telling the truth. She wrote about the gala, about what she had said and how she had said it, about the collectors who had laughed. She did not minimize any of it. She did not explain what she had been thinking or what pressure she had been managing or what the room had expected from her. She did not try to make herself understandable. She just told the truth about what she had done. And then, near the bottom of the page, one sentence. I confused polish with value. Kofi read it once. He read it a second time. He sat with it for a long moment. The rain steady against the window, the apartment holding its quiet around him the way it always did when Amara was at school, and the day belonged only to him. Then he folded the letter carefully, in thirds, the way his father used to fold letters, and placed it in the drawer beneath the kitchen counter where he kept Amara's school drawings and the last birthday card Zola had ever written him. He did not answer it, not because he was angry, not because he wanted to leave her wondering, but because some things do not need a response. They need to be received. They need to be placed somewhere careful and kept. That evening, Amara came home from school with paint on her sleeve and a drawing she had made in art class. A green car, low to the ground, surrounded by what appeared to be stars, or possibly flashbulbs, drawn by a 7-year-old who understood that some things deserve to be celebrated even after the celebration is over. She put the drawing on the refrigerator. Then she sat at the dinner table and pulled the chrome hubcap toward her, turning it slowly in her hands the way she always did, feeling the weight of it, the warmth it held from being carried close. "Daddy," she said, "do you think Mama knew about Grandpa's car?" Kofi set a plate in front of her. He thought about Zola, about the way she used to say it, warm and certain, like a fact she had verified years before everyone else caught up. "You always notice what everyone else misses, Kofi." "I think," he said, "she knew about a lot of things the rest of us were still catching up to." Amara turned the hubcap over once more. Then she set it carefully beside his plate, right next to his hand. No explanation. None needed. The rain kept going outside. The kitchen light was warm. Somewhere in a Swiss museum, the only other surviving prototype of the same vehicle sat behind glass in climate-controlled silence. Never touched, never driven. Displayed at a careful, respectful distance. And in a small apartment in an ordinary city, a man and his daughter ate dinner together in the kind of quiet that only exists when everything that needed to happen finally has. The chrome hubcap caught the light from the overhead fixture and held it there, steady, small, and worth more than anyone standing in that gala had been willing to see. Until one man looked. Until one man always looked. If this story moved you, if you have ever been the person in the room that nobody saw coming, drop a comment right now and tell us your moment. The moment the world finally looked. The moment you knew what you had, even when nobody else did yet. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if Kofi and Amara's story is the kind of story that belongs in your life, hit subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what comes next. Every week, we bring you stories about real dignity, quiet strength, and the kind of people the world underestimates right up until it can't afford to anymore. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for another person is simply say, "I see you." And I always did.